Welcome to the History Channel's Look Back at the 9/11 year. I'm Arthur Kent. The terrorist attacks that day focused America's attention on the Islamic world. Some Americans' first reaction was to regard all Muslims as enemies. But it was clear to most that they had to make a distinction between one of the world's great religions and the fanatics who had taken it to a violent extreme.
The events of September 11, 2001 left an entire world speechless with horror. Long before any news report had identified the perpetrators of this heinous deed, many Americans already assumed it was the work of extremist Islamic terrorists. How did a religion that preaches peace and tolerance become so entwined with violence in Western thinking? Hijackers, hostage takers, suicide bombers. These are the images many associate with Islam. But do these extremists represent the religion's true message?
Even though people know that there are a lot of things that Christians have done, they tend to talk about the teachings of Jesus as though that somehow represents Christianity, not what Christians have actually done. And then they look at Islam and don't know what the Quran says or what Muhammad taught through his sayings and actions, but see the behavior of extremists and think that represents Islam.
Jihad. It is a concept so integral to Islam, many Muslims believe it constitutes a sixth pillar of the faith. But many Muslim scholars and practitioners decry the simplistic warlike interpretation of the term.
The Arabic to English translation of jihad is struggle, and a sacred struggle or a holy struggle, but it is first and foremost an inner struggle.
Growing up in America as a Muslim, I had friends who were dating, I had friends who were drinking, doing all kinds of things that weren't permissible in Islam. And for me, that was my jihad. That was my struggle to deal with those temptations and overcome them and say, you know, this is something that my religion doesn't allow.
The greater jihad is to struggle against your base desires. The lesser jihad is to struggle against an enemy.
It is a radical interpretation of this lesser definition of jihad, with which most of the world is now too tragically familiar.
Over Muslim history, the term jihad has more often meant just war. So it is a kind of just warfare, and that, in the modern sense, is very often determined to be defensive war against external aggressors.
Even so, the Quran places restrictions on those who would wage this type of warfare.
Fight in the cause of Allah, those who fight you, but do not transgress limits, for Allah loveth not transgressors.
In Muslim warfare, it's prohibited to kill women and children, to kill non-combatant civilians, for example. These things are all completely prohibited.
Yet recent events have shown that for many thousands of Muslims, the end justifies the means in their definition of holy war. In more than 50 years of Arab-Israeli conflict, the world has witnessed a multitude of atrocities committed in the name of Islam. Assassinations, hijackings, and more recently, suicide bombings.
Now, of course, suicide in Islam is categorically forbidden to a Muslim. In theory, God gives life, only God can take life.
Today, radical factions of Islam have honed in on the United States as a target of terrorism, culminating in the attacks of September 11, 2001.
September 11th made Americans aware of the viciousness of the radical, violent fringe in Islam. But it also paradoxically, made more Americans aware of the fact that there are Muslims who are their neighbors who care in the same way that they do.
It is understandable to fear those terrorists who claim to act in the name of Islam. However, nerve gas attacks in the Tokyo subway, IRA bombings in Britain, the carnage in Oklahoma City, these and other recent events show us that Islam holds no monopoly on terror.
After the Oklahoma City bombing, we did get a letter in the mail with a clipping about the bombing, and somebody had put a Post-it note on it saying, "Look what your people have done." In the end, it turned out that a white American man was responsible, Tim McVeigh, so I guess they were right. It was one of my people who did it because I'm American too.
Iraq is my birthplace. The government of Iraq took half of my family hostages and killed many of them. America gave me freedom and dignity. This is the land where I can worship God freely without fear, without intimidation, without the harassment of the secret intelligence. And I love this country. And I am thankful to God who brought me here to this country and made me feel again that I'm a human.
This is a time when religion has to show its real soul. If we don't, I think it will be a confirmation that religion is passé, more than that it's a negation of all of the healthy dreams that all of us have for the future.
The biblical imperatives are pretty clear. The two greatest commandments are to love God and to love your neighbor as yourself. And so the question becomes immediately, well, who is my neighbor? Well, surely Jesus wasn't saying only people who look like you and think like you and who worship exactly like you, but it's clearly a reference to other human beings.
It is in everybody's interest that our worlds do not collide, but rather reinforce each other, because we all are hoping for the same thing. We all believe basically in the same things. And when we think we don't, it's only because we have looked at each other as stereotypes, not as human beings.